Dmytro Kuleba, Ukraine's foreign minister, has warned countries which mistreated Ukraine during the darkest moment of its history will be held to account after the war ends. In an interview with the BBC, he also warned Western allies that delaying the delivery of weapons will cost the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. Our diplomatic correspondent James Landale began by asking him why the battle for Bakhmut is so important.
The battle for Bakhmut is now the longest of the war. More than half a year of bloody fighting for control of what's little more than rubble.
Minister, hi.
But Ukraine's foreign minister told me that holding the city was vital, and not just for the damage it's causing to Russia's army.
Defending Bakhmut is emotionally very challenging because people find it hard emotionally to carry the burden of this death, loss of human life and destruction. It's a struggle to save those who are behind Bakhmut from the same destiny as Bakhmut is now suffering from.
He said what Ukraine needs in Bakhmut and elsewhere on the front line is artillery shells, and Western partners were not acting fast enough.
If one delivery is postponed for one day, it means that someone is going to die on the front line. It means that someone who could have been still alive is going to die.
Western allies may be giving military support like tanks, and now potentially even fighter jets. But some countries oppose the war and have given Ukraine nothing. For them, Mr. Kuleba had a warning, telling me any nations which mistreat Ukraine now would pay a price in the future.
If anyone in the world thinks that the way this or that country behaved itself or treated Ukraine at the darkest moment of its history, and that will not be taken into account in building future relations, these people just don't know how diplomacy works.
For now, the fighting continues, but so too does the diplomacy, for without that, Ukraine's soldiers will run out of the arms and ammunition they need to hold their ground. James Landale, BBC News, Kyiv.
Well, I was able to talk to James a little while ago, who's in Kyiv, and I asked him if he'd been able to understand from that interview why Ukraine was choosing to defend Bakhmut so intensely.
Why is Ukraine defending what is effectively a pile of rubble so hard? And one of the reasons that has been given primarily so far, if you listen to the overnight speeches of President Zelensky and other ministers, is they say, look, this is about damaging the Russian war machine. It's simply because Russia is throwing so many waves of soldiers at this battle, and they are dying in such number, that Ukraine believes that Bakhmut is effectively a tool to degrade Russia's war machine. But what was interesting when I spoke to Mr. Kuleba was he said, yes, that's true, but also he said there is effectively a military reason. In other words, that if Ukraine gave up Bakhmut, they would just have to pull back, and they would then just have to defend the next town, and then the next town, and the next town. In other words, they might as well defend in Bakhmut, because if they weren't defending in Bakhmut, they would be defending, 5 kilometers down the road. And so therefore he said, the price we're paying in Bakhmut is to save lives further down the line.
And we also heard him saying to you that delays in delivery of weapons cost Ukrainian lives. On Thursday, we heard Poland announce it's the first NATO country to supply Ukraine with fighter jets. How significant is that? And do we expect others to follow?
Well, look, it is significant that Poland has said that 4 MiG fighters will be sent. They haven't been sent yet. These are pretty old aircraft. They're about 30 years old. Poland inherited them from East Germany, if we can remember that far back. But they are aircraft on which Ukrainian pilots have been trained, and these will probably be the first of a number. 4 from Poland. They've got up to 20, that more will come, they say, in the future. We know other countries like Slovakia, Finland and the Netherlands have indicated they will be prepared to give some MiG fighters. What I don't think this signals is the start of up-to-date, modern aircraft from other countries in the West, especially the F-16 fighters from the United States. Because at the moment, the United States is saying, look, we could send these, but it would spend months to train people to use them. They would require huge amounts of ground staff, and that would be an escalation, I think, too far for the United States, at least right now.
And James, whilst we talk of modern weaponry, we've been seeing in recent reports how reminiscent of wars of many years ago the battle for Bakhmut is in many ways. Do we get a sense of which way the balance is going militarily there, in whose favour?
Well, you're absolutely right. In my interview with Mr. Kuleba, he made the comparison with the First World War. And the point he was making is that the West had not been prepared for a conflict of this scale, and that's why they were struggling to find particularly the artillery shells and other ammunition to supply Ukraine, because basically most countries have allowed their stocks to go down because they simply didn't believe that this kind of conflict was likely to happen again. In terms of the situation in Bakhmut, well, it's very, very slow progress on either side. There are reports almost daily of Russia making very small incremental gains, but they are very, very incremental. Russia has positions to the east, to the north, to the south. They're attempting to encircle the remaining Ukrainian forces in the center, but at the moment, Russia is not achieving that encirclement. The one highway out for the east that allows Ukraine to resupply its forces is still open. It is occasionally under Russian fire, but it's a pretty static picture at the moment.
James Landale in Kyiv.